Welcome back to our journey through Proverbs. We're going to continue in chapter 2. We just made our way through verses 6 through 8 in the last video, so we're going to continue on in 9 through 15. If you're wondering why we divided it up that way, go ahead and go back and watch that last video where we explained how we kind of divided up the sections. But these sections are actually very, very related. And we found even last video that we were connecting so many things back into the passage before. So be sure you're all caught up on that so that you can get the most out of today as we start in verse 9. So let's go ahead and read that together. Then you will understand righteousness and justice, and equity, every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So the first thing I notice is this then. Right? So when was the last time we saw then? The last time we saw then was in verse 5. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord. And if you're worried about these scribbles, you need to go back and watch the video. They made slightly more sense then. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord, and you'll find the knowledge of God. Then we started talking, right, about the role of the Lord in finding this knowledge and the fear and what was going to happen, how God is the one giving wisdom, how from his mouth are coming knowledge and understanding, how he has been the path, illuminated the path, maintained the path, all of these beautiful things. And now, where we have another then, and we've returned to the subject of you and I. And what's going on this path now that we have begun, right? Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Now that we're beginning, well, what is life going to look like now? And one of the ways it's going to look, right, is that epic, beautiful adventure that we talked about. But it's also going to be difficult. It's also going to be a tough path. But there it will be every good path. So you will understand righteousness and justice and equity. And for wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Okay, so we mentioned this in the last video, so let's go ahead and kind of double down on it. Notice how the you subject transitions to wisdom being the subject, knowledge, discretion, and understanding. And they're all will. Okay, you will understand righteousness and justice and equity. This then, right, connecting back to the one in verse 5, is a continuation of the result of the completion of the if clause, right? If you complete the journey and you continue on the quest, you keep going down that path. Remember, because if you refer back to some of the videos in Chapter 1, you'll remember that wisdom is on a spectrum, and that spectrum may seem like, well, it's just foolish to wise, when actually foolish to not wise to wise, when actually there's a whole nother section of more wise, and that goes on for infinity. And in this case, if you're going through this process that we discussed in verses 1 through 5, and whether you're a Christian or not, if you begin this process, you will find at the end of it the knowledge of God, and then you will understand the fear of the Lord, you'll understand the knowledge of God, you'll understand righteousness, justice, equity, and every good path. And remember, this is a reference back to Proverbs 1:3. For wisdom will come into your heart. Okay, and that for is pretty important, I think. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. So where is this understanding coming from? Okay, how is this understanding possible? Because you might ask yourself, what's going on? So I'm taking these paths, I'm doing these things, but what change is actually occurring, and how is it occurring? And this passage seems to be beginning to illuminate that for us, right? How is this possible? And the question transitions us, just as we were talking about noticing that transition before from you to wisdom to knowledge. How is this possible? Well, we're not talking about you anymore. We're talking about wisdom. And now you're not the subject. You're the object. Okay, so we make a transition from subject to object. And that's really good because remember, we have been talking this whole leg of the journey on chapter 2 about receiving, okay? And plenty in chapter 1 as well, but we've really been honing in on it in chapter 2. The object receives, this is a quick grammar lesson, receives the action of the subject. And so we've transitioned from being the subject doing the action to the object receiving the action. And remember, that's the kind of person who, when they come at the end of this process, or through the cycle of this process, they have to be at the end willing to receive because they didn't earn the wisdom, because we don't force God to give us what he has. He willingly gives it. But we do have to rely on him for the gift and then be willing to receive it. And so wisdom will come into your heart. You will receive wisdom in your heart. And man, this is just connecting all kinds of dots, because remember what we talked about in verse 1, right? What were we doing? We were valuing, we were making room. So we made room. And now wisdom comes in. And knowledge will be pleasant to your soul, right? You'll be able to treasure it. You wanted it. You called out for it, and now it's going to bring you joy. Right? So you made room, now it's coming into your heart, and the knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. And you might ask, well, how? There's a couple questions you might ask. How does it come in? And in what way will it be pleasant to my soul? How will this knowledge be pleasant to my soul? Well, the how will it come in is, well, it will come in because you made room, and now you've become open to receiving through the process, going through this process of making room, desiring, calling out, and ultimately searching after and questing after and coming to receive from God. Okay? And so that's how the wisdom comes into your heart. God, you've put yourself in a posture to receive, and now God is giving, and the knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Remember, the path may be hard, it may be difficult, but this is reminding you of the immense value of what you've been searching for. I think another way to say this is that it was worth it. Everything that you've gone through, every change that's been made, it will have been worth it. Knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you. Now that's pretty beautiful, okay? Because we often think about using our discretion understanding, right, to navigate difficulties, to avoid danger. But now we're getting, well, actually it reminds me of an image that's used fairly regularly in the Psalms. I think in 90 or 91 in particular, at least that's where I'm remembering it from, I believe. I could be wrong on that, though. Someone will have to fact check me later. But it makes me think, and this may not seem like a wing, but the Psalms talk about God guarding us under his wings. And usually we think about using discretion and understanding like a tool, but this is something more like a covering, and we're under here, and maybe we're afraid, maybe we're scared, but we're covered. This Discretion is important. We need to use it. There's a place for it as a tool. But remember, we've switched into this receiving mode. And it's like, well, what do we receive from discretion, from this experience of gathering it, of seeking it, of treasuring it, of valuing it, of it coming into our lives? Well, it actually watches over us, right? The protection is active in some sense on our part, but it's also kind of this passive acceptance of the power of discretion to watch over us kindly, and for understanding to guard us, right? Because this next section is going to be talking lots about what it's guarding us from. But that's a really beautiful image of being able to rest. You've taken this long journey, and now you're receiving the thing that you've made room for. It's worth the journey, and now you don't have to worry, because the discretion, that thing, part of that thing that you've been longing for, now it's going to watch over you. Your understanding is going to guard you, right? Because when you understand, and let's go back to that understanding. You will understand what? Because this is pretty important. What will you understand? You will understand righteousness, justice, equity, and every good path. Gosh, what more could you ask for? But not only will you understand those things, but the last time we used understanding, right? We talked about out of his mouth come knowledge and understanding. So this kind of understanding is straight from God. But then go back even further, and we look at verse 5, and you will understand the fear of the Lord. Right? You will understand what it means to posture yourself before God properly, to be as a creature should be. And with it comes all of this beautiful guardianship and this opportunity for rest. Because your understanding of the fear of the Lord, of righteousness, of justice, of equity, of every good path, all of this acts like a fortification. A fortification for your soul, right? You're covered by the wings, right, of discretion and understanding. But there's also this element of that these things that you've understood are solid. They're immovable. They're powerful, right? This wall, this fortification is made of justice, right? It's made of equity. It's made up of the knowledge of the good paths. You could call this direction, right? It's righteousness. And all of these things are part of the character of God, right? And so he's hemming you in behind and before. He's gathering you up. He's fortifying you. He's covering you. He's saying as you walk these paths, there are going to be challenges that will feel absolutely insurmountable, but I am going to protect you. I am going to cover you. Wisdom will be enough because God, who is wisdom, is enough. And that's pretty amazing. Because there's a lot to be guarded from. You will be delivered from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech who forsake the paths of uprightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. Right? This first verse, this first part of verse 12, it makes so much sense. Delivering you from the way of evil. Right? You immediately have this contrast of what God's path is going to be like, where wisdom will come into your heart, where you're an active recipient. And so, yes, you have a part to play. You get to be a part of this path and have a relationship with all of these things. And yet the impetus and the power is coming from someone who is more powerful than you, right? Who's greater than you, more capable than you, which gives you the opportunity to do even more than you would have been able to otherwise. And now we have this transition delivering you from the way of evil, because what was the other option, right? You have this amazing, incredible thing going on, but what was the other option? It was the way of evil, where the speech is perverted. And yes, we have to be delivered from this. Remember? Because we have to receive from God, right? We don't want to climb this path of justice to go away on the empty descent, right? Where our cup still isn't full because we got to the top and realized that we didn't earn it, that it's being given to us. And some people can't handle that. But to reject it, to walk back down, is to be on the way of evil. It's to be with men of perverted speech. And it's very interesting that, these double lines have so powerfully reflected one another. And the first reflection, right, as we transition, is deliver you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech. And my question is, what do the way of evil and men of perverted speech have to do with one another? I'd be inclined to look at verse 15. There's a lot more to look at in 13 and 14, but the word crooked stands out to me. So delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech. Speech has been the means of the understanding that you've received, right? The understanding, the wisdom. So all of these things that are coming over you, all of these things that are girding you up, guarding you, making you more capable and able to walk down the difficult paths, they've all been mediated through speech. God has made them known from his mouth, right? It was, what verse was that? It was verse 6. For the Lord gives wisdom. That's the thing that came into your heart. From his mouth comes knowledge. Knowledge is the thing that was pleasant. And understanding. And what did you understand? Righteousness, justice, equity, every good path. The direction you need to go. So speech is the great mediator of those things that you needed to continue on. Of those things which made the whole journey worth it, right? And men of perverted speech are synonymous with the way of evil, because God's speech is not perverted, because his paths are not crooked, and because he is a truth teller. And so that which comes out of the mouth of God is rivers of living water. That which comes out of the mouth of the evil men are perverted. They take you away from what is good. They inverse, they twist, they turn, and they don't take you in any meaningful direction. They don't gird you up. They don't cover you. These are the things which must be avoided. Because what does perverted speech mediate to you, right? If the speech of God mediates all that is good, right? That's not a question mark. That's just the way it is. Then what does perverted speech mediate? I mean, I think the answer is destruction. So that's something deeply consider. I mean, this is a pretty serious life question. So what does your speech mediate? Right? Both God and those who are doing evil are mediating to us something which they have and perhaps we didn't. God mediates what is good and true and beautiful and will guard you and cover you up and guide you and give you the strength to go on. But the speech of evil men will tear down, it will destroy, it will set you off course, it will not watch out for you, it will seek your destruction, it will seek your weaknesses. And when we apply that principle to ourselves, well, what does your speech mediate? Is it like the speech of God, or is it more like the speech of evil men? Right? Because this is a book of wisdom, and even the big, beautiful pictures that Proverbs builds out for us can continue to be applied to our very own actions, whether or not we are acting wisely or acting evilly. And we don't quite have time now, but we'll return to this section again, verses 12 to 15 in particular, to continue dissecting what's going on with these different paths and how they compare to the paths of the just and the upright, and what are the other markers and what those mean for us and how we can kind of test ourselves against those. But for now, let's remind ourselves of where we've been. And this is a little messy today. But we talked about how we transition from the subject to the object, right? We begin to be receptive. And what we're receiving is what we prepared to receive for, right? We went through that process in the first part of chapter 2, right? And now is kind of that key word. We did these things, and now this is what comes, right? The then is the completion of the if conditions. And it's fulfilling, it's valuable, it's peaceful. You are watched over. You have the opportunity to rest because you've been given a secure wall, a secure moving fortress in which to walk, in which to journey. As compared to, right, the way of evil. This is how you are delivered from those of perverted speech, because this is the mediation of what is good, and the speech of the evil men mediates only destruction. And so if you don't have justice and equity in every good path, you don't have direction, you don't have righteousness, you don't have an understanding of these things and a desire for them and a filling up of them, then you will be drawn off to the evil path. And that's why this is an interesting marker of whether or not we have been, right? What does your speech mediate? Hopefully only what is good and true and beautiful, righteousness and every good path. But if it doesn't, no one is beyond help, and God knows we need his help every day to continue to mediate only what he would have us say. Thank you for joining me. I'll look forward to going through the next part in verses 12 through 15 with you. Look for that in the next video. Hope to see you there.